Oh, and the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon. Little boy blue and the man in the moon. When you coming home, Dad? I don't know when, but we'll get together then soon. It's a sad, sad song, especially for Barry. Barry's dad left years ago to go pick up some Pop-Tarts and never came back. Hey, Barry, your dad's going to be visiting for Christmas this year. Isn't that crazy? Barry's dad is not visiting for Christmas this year. It was an old box of Pop-Tarts, too. Like, they're discontinued. They don't even sell them anymore. Yeah, aren't you excited? Oh, it's going to be fun. Okay, great. What are we talking about today? Oh, look at that. Coincidentally related to the song I just sang. I'm very sorry for singing that song, by the way. For one thing, I just have a terrible singing voice, and in other cases, if you actually don't have a great relationship with your father, but you also know who doesn't have a great relationship with their father, Luffy and Dragon, especially because Dragon isn't really around. Luffy didn't even know who his dad was, until he was, 17 years old? That was the first time he even knew his dad's name, and then he didn't even see a picture of Dragon, because, okay, if Luffy would have read the newspaper prior to that at all, he probably would have seen Dragon's face featured prominently, considering, he's the leader of the Revolutionary Army, so I imagine he shows up in the newspaper quite a bit. We saw it in the flashback, he shows up in the newspaper, so yeah, if Luffy would have looked at any newspaper, he probably would have connected the dots pretty quickly. Like, Monkey D. Dragon, Revolutionary? Same family name, has the will of D. Maybe I should ask Grandpa about this. That's assuming Luffy thinks that kind of stuff, and he does not, okay? So even after Luffy found out, who his dad was and what he looked like, I mean, Luffy was shocked. He was like, what? That's my dad? But he recovered from that pretty quickly. He didn't, it's like, whoa, I gotta meet him. I have so many stories to tell him, right? I'm gonna go and become a hunter so I can get a license and I can find my dad. Yeah, there was nothing like that. So, is Dragon a good father to Luffy? Well, I think if you just look deep down inside and you realize the kind of character that, no, he is not. Okay, he wasn't even there to raise Luffy, so you can't say Dragon is a good dad. He's definitely not, okay? However, and this is a point I brought up in the review, chapter 1101. Chapter 1101, Dragon had a little bit of a dialogue with Kuma. They were talking about how Kuma had wandered off away from the Goa Kingdom. He had discovered Fuchsia Village while he was just kind of stretching his legs, and he discovered Luffy, this little rubber kid, jumping around the neighborhood or whatever, and he brings Luffy up to Dragon, and Dragon just kind of tries to end the conversation right there, like does not even want to discuss Luffy, and is like, no, don't mention it. If you talk about it anymore, you might as well be asking me to just off myself right here. And Kuma is like, whoa, that's really intense. What's up with that kid? And Dragon is like, scars on the back are a swordsman's shame. I'm sorry. Children are a parent's one weakness. And so Kuma at that point realized, oh, okay, I understand, and they just ended the conversation right there, because at that point Kuma was the father of Bonnie and was raising Bonnie back on Sorbet. This was back when Kuma was still a revolutionary and would travel with them, and then this was before Bonnie got sick with the Sapphire Scale, and after she became sick, he officially quit the revolutionaries. This is in that little period, before Bonnie was, I think, before she was 4 years old, because I think the symptoms manifested when she was 3 or 4, something like that. So, obviously cared for Bonnie, not his biological daughter, but still raised her like she was, right, of course. And so after realizing that, oh, okay, and I'm sure Kuma had a suspicion before that, yeah, that kid is probably Dragon's son, and, the suspicions were confirmed, and it's okay, I'm not going to bring this up anymore, okay? And because the way Dragon speaks about it is, if somebody found out that Luffy, my son, was somewhere on this island out in the middle of the East, they could threaten him. They could capture him. If the world government found out that Monkey D. Dragon, ruler of the revolutionaries, had a child, you saw what they did with Roger's children, right? Or even potential children. They literally rolled up to all the islands that Roger had been at or spotted, or even maybe some of those were probably not even accurate. Some people were probably just I saw Goldie Roger, king of the pirates, he was on our island, and that might have just been like a dude with a particularly large mustache. He might not even have been there. Doesn't matter. Government sent Cypher Pole and the Marines to all those islands to eliminate every pregnant woman around, to make damn sure that if Roger had a child, any kind of offspring, they were eliminated, okay? And so you saw what happened with that. So Dragon, who was also, by the way, present at Roger's execution, would have realized pretty quickly that, like, yeah, I don't want, I don't want that, threat to even exist, okay? So, like, keep it a secret, Kuma. No one would know. Dragon didn't even tell Ivankov, who's, like, his closest friend, and they, like, founded the Revolutionary Army together. Even Ivankov was like, hey, Dragon, you always look off into the east, is perhaps any family there? Hee-haw. And then, Dragon is like, keep it to yourself, Ivankov. I don't want to hear this crap. I'm Monkey D. Dragon. Okay, yeah, all right. So, is Dragon a good dad to Luffy? No, he's not. But as I said in the review, I think you get a free pass on being a shitty dad if you are literally trying to save the world. I will go on record right now and say this, okay? You are allowed to be a bad dad if you abolish slavery worldwide. Maybe that might be a contentious issue. I don't know. It's like, nope, you're still a shitty person. I don't care how many worlds you save. It's like that. In my opinion, Dragon is trying to dismantle the oppressive grip, this iron fist that the Tenryobito have over the entire world, slavery worldwide, extortion through the heavenly tribute worldwide, the celestial dragons given carte blanche to do anything they want. They can kill anyone they want. They can have as many sex slaves as they want. They can do all these horrible things. Dragon is the one that literally put down his foot and said, enough is enough. I am ending this. Now, in order to do that, Dragon had to sacrifice a lot. He basically had to surrender his entire personal life and dedicate his entire existence to this one task. And he has been doing that for nearly 3 decades now. We saw that the freedom fighters were up and running around 26, 25 years ago when Kuma saw them in the paper. I think that was the earliest example of them being a thing. They weren't the revolutionaries yet. They didn't have a huge force yet. They were probably just a ragtag band of like mercenaries and nothing more at that point. So pretty close to 30 years ago is when Dragon started his little operation. He was a Marine before that. That makes sense because Garp, who's Dragon's father, was a Marine, and Garp would have raised Dragon to be a Marine. Dragon stated, I left that organization because I saw no justice there. Pretty much Dragon was one of the few people in the Marines upon realizing, I'm sure as soon as he got to a decently high rank in the Marines, he had an officer rank at least probably, he saw the corruption of the Tenryobito and the whole system, and he's like, no, I'm not dealing with this. And I bet, you know what? I bet it was even a moment where Garp even sat down with Dragon and tried to kind of tell him about like, all right, listen, son, I understand you're upset with the Tenryobito and everything and the way the world government is run. A lot of the Marines have the similar problems with it, but, think about all the good the Marines bring in the world. There is corruption, absolutely, but it's just one of those things you have to deal with. And then, there's probably a lot of Marines that, when they're young and they just start out, they're like, oh, this is horrible, this is awful, but then maybe they justify it in a sense of just like either, oh, well, maybe I'll gain a high rank in the Marines and then I'll change things. Or, maybe the evil the world government commits is okay as long as the good outweighs it. Maybe these Marines might justify it, and Garp in a similar way might have also justified it that way. But Dragon was the one that's like, nope, I'm quitting the Marines and going to form a revolutionary army to dethrone the rulers of the known government. That's what Dragon does. Dragon is committed, if nothing else, okay? And so, yeah. And you know what? I bet that was even maybe a moment for Garp. Maybe Garp was just like, he wasn't happy about Dragon's decision, but like, maybe Garp at least envied. It's like, well, maybe, my son has the balls, you know what I mean? Like, my son Dragon has the balls to go out there and actually try to change the world for the better, okay? Something that, Garp himself never did, and something that a lot of Marines, and there are some really good Marines, like Smoker is a good Marine, but I think they get delusional in the sense that they can reform the world government from within the world government. Like, if they just get a high enough rank in the Marines, they'll be able to change stuff. They won't really be able to change anything notable. Even Akainu, who became the fleet admiral, was really, pretty quickly realized that, like, oh yeah, there's really, I'm still under the thumb of the Celestial Dragons and the Gorosei, even more so now than I was just as a vice admiral or a regular admiral, right? So yeah, the Tenryubito really are the ones that rule everything. Who's at the top of the Tenryubito? The Gorosei. And then who's at the top of the Gorosei? Im, who, by the way, along with the Gorosei, are probably all immortal beings with mythical devil zones. And it's like, yeah, once you start getting into the leaders of the world government being eldritch gods, it's like at that point, the reform policy is not really going to cut it. You need to have a revolution, okay, at that point, and Dragon's heading it up, all right? So, we're not really talking about Dragon's Revolution, or we're not really talking about that today. We're really talking about, I think there's going to be a moment in this story where Dragon and Luffy are going to meet, all right? What would that moment be like? How would that go? I hesitate to say it would be awkward, because I don't even know if it would be. Because I really don't see a moment where Luffy sees Dragon after the fight is over. The revolution has succeeded. The Tenryubito system has been abolished. The government and the Marines are on their way to a nice, bright, hopeful future as the sun beams down on all of it. All of the chains are broken. Slavery is no more. All races of the world live together in peace and harmony, finally, after 800 years of oppression. I don't see a moment where Luffy is going to be like, oh, that's my dad. I'm really nervous. I don't know what to say to the guy. No, if anything, honestly, I could see Luffy's reaction to Dragon being this. Oh, hey. Oh, hey, you're my dad. Yes, Luffy, I'm your dad. Sorry I wasn't there for you growing up. And about your mother. And then Luffy just wanders off somewhere. Like, I honestly see it kind of like that. Like, Luffy gives so little shits about his dad or whatever. Like, Luffy gets, distracted by a feast or something. Meanwhile, I feel with that line of dialogue, Dragon does love his son. He does care about Luffy. He watches over him periodically whenever he's in the East Blue. He saw him off at Logtown. And I think maybe in the back of his mind, Dragon is thinking like, hey, maybe when the revolution does succeed and finally everything happens and I'm still alive at the end of it, because I'm also assuming Dragon is under the opinion that, like, yeah, this could result in my death, but I have to do it. I have to fight for the cause, But if, like, Dragon might be viewing it like, okay, if I do manage to make it all through this alive, I would like to see my son. I would like to sit down with Luffy and have a talk with him. If anything, I could see Dragon having it more awkward, and Dragon is this very serious, like, Batman-esque figure of just like, my name is Monkey D. Dragon. I'm here to kick ass and chew bubblegum. And I don't believe in bubblegum. That's Dragon, right? But I could see Dragon being like, oh no, that's my son. Ivankov, that's my son. It's like, I know, Dragon, go talk to your son. Hee-haw! I don't know what to say to him. I've abandoned him his entire life. I just don't know how to, I don't know what's going on here. I could see Dragon being more flustered than Luffy. Luffy, eventually, if it's like just Luffy and Dragon sitting on like a park bench together and just being like, Luffy is such an interesting character. I just don't know how to, like, would Luffy be like, hey, Dad, you want to hear about my adventures? Okay, you know what the one thing I could see him doing, Luffy, is like, hey, Dad, check out my crew. Like, that would be cool. Hey, Dad, meet my crew. Come over here, Like, I don't think Luffy would like, oh, you abandoned me, Dad, all those birthdays, all those Christmases that have passed, and I never got a present from you. You never wanted to be in my life. That's not Luffy. That's not how Luffy talks, not by a freaking country mile. And country miles are at least 10 times further than a regular mile, right? So that's not how Luffy talks. If anything, Luffy would just be like, oh, you're Dragon. Oh, you're my dad. Crazy. I'm finally meeting you. Anyway, this is my crew. This is Zoro. He's like a samurai. And Nami is a, what are you, Nami? I'm a lady. She's a lady. And then it just keeps going on like, this is Chopper. He's doctoring. It's like, I can see that, but I can see that, like, in the same way of, like, Luffy introducing, like, anybody to his crew. You know what I mean? I don't even see Luffy asking questions to Dragon about Garp, because Luffy's not, he is not the kind of person to pry into people's personal lives. Have you ever noticed that about Luffy? Luffy will just ask whatever random questions pop into his head. Like, hey, Dad, do you poop? Okay, Dragon's like, you know what, son? Okay. Dragon's really awkward, and he's really afraid to talk to Luffy, and Ivankov is just like, go talk to your son. And Dragon walks up, hey, Luffy, hi. Oh, do you poop? Then immediately everything just like Dragon's brain just fries and glitches out. He's yes, I guess. It is like, oh, cool, me too. Great father-son talk we're having here, okay? But no. Like, Luffy does not pry. Luffy does not like, Dad, why did you abandon me? Dad, who's my mom? Dad, what was it like with Garp raising you? I really don't see Luffy being the one to initiate those kind of, conversations. Now, with respect to that last question, though, like, hey, Dad, what was it like being Garp's son, I can kind of see them bonding over a story involving Garp, but not Luffy being the one to start the conversation. Like, Dragon might be the one to bring it up. Maybe Dragon sits down, okay, they're on the park bench together, they're sitting there, and they're not really talking, and Dragon is just kind of like, so I know it must have probably been rough growing up in the East, I know you were raised by Dadan and everybody. And so maybe Luffy then responds with like, oh yeah, well, Grandpa, Garp, he threw me into a jungle and tied me to some balloons, and there was that one time he just, I don't know, a bunch of sharks chased after me. I'm not sure. You could just imagine all the things Garp did to Luffy. And then maybe there's a moment there where Dragon is like, yeah, that's Garp, all right, that's my dad. And so maybe they could bond over that. Like, there's a story there. At least I like a couple lines of dialogue there. But just the idea of Luffy having a serious heart-to-heart discussion with his dad, that might as well qualify as like an oxymoron for how not Luffy that is, so just the idea, like, so I really think the way Oda's gonna push this is like, they will have a conversation, but it's not gonna be that serious kind of conversation, maybe Dragon might bring up Luffy's mom. He might be like a situation where it's like, do you want to hear about your mother, Luffy? I'll tell you if you want to. If not, I won't. And so Luffy might be like, I really don't care. You know what I mean? It might be something like that, where it's like Luffy, in fact, viewing a mother, maybe Dadan or Makino might be like a figure that he views as his mom. But I also like, taking it away from that respect, not even like with like Gon from Hunter x Hunter and the whole Gon and Jean thing, right? And then in that situation, Gon still viewed like, oh, Aunt Mito is my mom. I already have a mom, right? But Luffy is in the like category where you get the impression he doesn't even care about who his parents are. Luffy does not sit around and like, who's my dad? Who is my mom? But he also doesn't sit around thinking like, Dadan was my mom. He never says that stuff. You really get the impression from Luffy that he just does not care. Luffy is someone that just lives in the moment. There's even times when you'll have somebody going through their really tragic backstory, like when Jinbei was expositing all about the backstory with Fisher Tiger and the Sun Pirates, and he's telling this whole story to the Straw Hats at the Sea Forest, and Luffy's not even paying attention to most of it. I think he fell asleep halfway through it, you know what I mean? So it's like, in that respect, Luffy is a little rude and kind of selfish in that regard. Now, in that respect, also, he's really good at reading emotions. Like, when he sees Nami, like, very visibly upset during Arlong Park, Luffy's like, okay, this is someone that's ruined my crewmates and my friend's life. I'm going to make sure he pays for that, okay? And so Luffy's good at doing that kind of stuff. But when it comes to, like, these serious, like honestly, a therapist would have a field day with Luffy. Did you just see the way that Luffy dealt with Ace's death? So Ace dies right in front of Luffy, like in Luffy's arms, right? And Luffy just has like a freak out moment where he just basically turns off. Like his whole brain just shuts down and he goes into like a, because like he doesn't know how to process that. So he's just unconscious from it. And then when he wakes up, he just goes on a rampage around Amazon Lily, just crushing boulders and crying. Like he's letting out his emotions, but you could tell this is something Luffy's not really that great at, okay? Like coping with loss and things like that. And then after the time skip, the first time Ace is really brought up directly to Luffy, because nobody really brings it up. It's not like when the Straw Hats come back on board, they go up to like Nami goes up to Luffy and is like, Luffy, it's nice to see you after 2 years. I'm so sorry about your brother, and like hugs Luffy or something. None of that really happened. Nobody really brought it up until Otama during Wano, where she says, oh yeah, I met Ace, he was a really nice guy, and he, we made hats together, and I'm gonna join his crew when I get older, right? Ace made me a promise. And you know how Luffy responded to that? Luffy just looks straight at Otama with this like deadpan expression on Luffy's face, and it's just like, Ace is dead, he's not coming back. And that's it. He doesn't really go into further detail with it, just like, Ace is dead, he's gone. So that's like that's like the most like emotional kind of one-to-one conversations Luffy has with somebody. Okay? So, yeah. In that respect, I think after a conversation between Dragon and Luffy, Dragon would kind of understand the person that Luffy is, and he likes to just, travel with his friends and go on adventures and things like that, and that is his family. Dragon would see through that encounter that, like, okay, Luffy's crew are his family. They are his nakama. The fact that I was not in his life, this is a messed up thing to say from like Dragon's perspective as a parent, but Dragon might be there and be like, Luffy never really honestly cared that I wasn't in his life. All right? Like, and that might just be because Luffy was not straight up abandoned, like there was nobody around. It's not like, Luffy was born and then his mother died and then Dragon just threw him on a deserted island and left him to the elements, okay, or anything like that. Luffy grew up with Garp watching over him, and Dadan and Makino, and then eventually Ace and Sabo, and, all the other mountain bandits and the citizens of Fuchsia Village and everybody like that. So Luffy had people in his life. It wasn't like, even Uta, if you want to consider Uta canon, which I do believe Uta is canon, and they're just basically going to redo a thing where, like, instead of, well, that's a little bit of a spoiler for the movie One Piece Film Red, so if you don't want to be spoiled for One Piece Film Red, just skip, like, the next 20 seconds of this, I guess. So in the movie, Uta dies at the end of it, and she's, like, Luffy's age. I think she's a little bit older than Luffy. They might rework Uta into the story where she is still Shanks' adoptive daughter, like, Shanks still finds her in the treasure chest and raises her and everything, but maybe she dies as a little kid instead. So Shanks still remembers her, but the movie is like a parallel timeline where she's like, she didn't die as a kid and died older, so maybe something like that with Uta. Anyway, Luffy had friends, was the point. He wasn't completely abandoned, and he just never viewed parental guidance as, like, important. But at the end of the conversation, Dragon might be like, okay, well, in that case, you're with your family, and so he would smile and be like, I'm glad you turned out good, Luffy. You turned out like you're all right. You're living your life the way that you want to live it, and I could ask for nothing more, and you're happy. And Luffy's like, yeah, okay, haha. And so maybe Dragon would be in Luffy's life a little bit after this, but they're not going to be going to, like, Thanksgiving dinner or whatever. I don't see Dragon, giving Luffy a birthday present or something. It's just not how it is, So, yeah, that's a video talking about just Dragon and Luffy's, father-son relationship, if any such thing would even be existent in the story. Let me know what you think about that down below. And remember, if you free the whole world from slavery, you're allowed to be an absent parent. That's Tekking's opinion. Signing out later, I guess. Bye. If you save the world from an alien invasion, it's all right to not be around for your kids as much. All right, maybe I'm being too lenient. I don't know. Have a good one, everybody. Signing out.